Vriesenhof Cabernet is coming from Vriesenhof. And it's the only wine that you could, if you make wine from those grapes, it must tell the story of the place. And in future, telling the history of the place. So again, we're back in the vineyard. Because the place you can't transfer. I mean, you can replant the vineyard, but I mean, there's no ways you can do it the other way around.
So we're going to have a little peek into the history of Vriesenhof, and at the same time just give you a sense of what Jan's world was like, surrounded by all the other winemakers that he grew up with, and you know, they shared wines, they swapped wines. So there's a lovely library of Stellenbosch wines that goes back to the 1970s, and it's all beneath the house that Jan built. It's underground, it's adjacent to our red wine maturation cellar, so it's very much the heart of the Vriesenhof experience. So I have 2 bottles of wine here in front of me, and they are just illustrative to the story of Cabernet Sauvignon in Stellenbosch. They form just a little part of the continuum that starts where my right hand is, and there should be a bottle of 1973 vintage Canon Corp Cabernet Sauvignon here, which there ain't. But in 74, Canon Corp released their first estate wine, and that was made by Jan Boland Coetzee. It was a 1973 vintage made by Jan and released in 1974. That was actually the year in which I was born. So there's that I guess is the beginning of my journey in some respects, and it was certainly a very important mark in Jan's journey and for Cabernet Sauvignon in Stellenbosch. And then of course when Jan left Canon Corp and bought Vriesenhof and made it his home, and it was his life's work basically, up until when Jan passed in 2025. He was instrumental in promoting Cabernet Sauvignon and helping it to become recognized internationally within Stellenbosch, and especially along this sort of part of the mountain where Vriesenhof is situated. And I have in front of me the 1994 Vriesenhof Cabernet Sauvignon, and that was actually, for me, it was the year that I came to Stellenbosch to start studying winemaking. And then on my left hand, we have the current release of the Vriesenhof Cabernet Sauvignon, the 2024. So spanning a 30-year history between these 2 wines. And obviously styles have changed significantly. And I think one of the things that Jan managed to do with Vriesenhof was to create a brand of wine that was immediately accessible to people. Cabernet Sauvignon was accessible. They could take a piece of Stellenbosch history and culture home with them, open it at the table and drink it. But at the same time, 30 years later, and in some cases 40 years later, the wines that Jan made are still in phenomenal condition and are just little time capsules of the history of Stellenbosch and the journey that Cabernet Sauvignon has taken in Stellenbosch. And it brings us to this point here where we have a slightly rejuvenated contemporary expression of the packaging, taking all of the timeless sort of heroes of these early Vriesenhof labels. So this is the 2024 version, and the wine is not the same as Jan's wines. The trends have changed, consumer preferences have moved on, and these are wines that are, I would say, probably are slightly more accessible in their youth, and should still, with good cellaring, be enjoyable in 20, 30 years from now. So my challenge as a winemaker is to make wines that people can take home and drink immediately, and they are fully expressive of the vintage and the variety, But if they want to hang on to it for another 5 to 10 years, those wines are definitely going to reward that extra kind of time and effort of cellaring. But certainly the joy of these wines is in enjoying them immediately. And whilst they're still young, after 2024 is sort of 2 years from the date of vintage, so it's had some barrel maturation, it's had some bottle maturation, and is drinking beautifully now. In closing, I think is a wonderful tribute to, let's say, 5 decades of Cabernet Sauvignon from Stellenbosch, and mostly at the hand of Jan Boland Coetzee, but and let's not also forget Nicky Claessens, who was at Vriesenhof for probably just over a decade. But it represents a beautiful story of Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon.